What's up guys, Michael Kumalo here, aka Dr. Gaines, and this is part 2 of a video series where I give you 13 awesome neuroscience-based tips and strategies that will allow you to hack into your own brain and reprogram it so that it has no choice but to lead you to achieving your goals. And while I'm going to tell you specifically how to use these strategies to achieve your fitness goals, the principles apply to any goal and any behavior change that you want to make in your life. In part 1, we discussed how to subliminally influence your motivations and behaviors and the benefits of goal co-activation, and then we did a deep dive into meditation and 5 specific strategies to rewire your brain. If you haven't seen that, I'll put a link here and in the video description below. Now here in part 2, we'll start off with a hack based on something called contingency management, and I'll explain why we as human beings will work harder to avoid losing something that we have than we would to gain something we do not. Then I'll give you hacks that are intended to make your goal behaviors automatic so that you do it without even have to think about it. Next, we'll touch on a principle called episodic future thinking, and this targets maybe the biggest reason why people don't achieve their fitness goals, why they give up, because it takes a long time, relatively, to see results from the actions. That's called delay discounting, and I'll give you a hack for overcoming it. After that, we'll learn how gaining a deeper knowledge and understanding of exercise science will drastically increase intrinsic motivation and the role of curiosity in filling our brains with dopamine. And then we'll cap it off with what I believe to be the most important strategy for setting your fitness goals and all the goals that you set for yourself in your life. Let's get to it. The next tip involves a principle called contingency management. It's related to operant conditioning, if you've heard of that, but it is a way to add external motivation that increases the value of the goal behavior. For example, in a study done on contingency management in 2006, researchers got together a group of addicts of various substances. They had opiate addicts, methamphetamine, cocaine, alcohol, tobacco, and they gave them money in return for abstaining from the substance use. The participants came in regularly, and if they passed a blood screening or other test showing that they indeed had abstained from using whatever substance it was, they got money, and it continued on. And the result was that this strategy was twice as effective as getting addicts to recover as outpatient medical treatment, and 3 times as effective as addiction therapy. And this has proven true across the board with various behaviors, even mental health and physical activity. In another study done in 1986 in France, researchers had participants hold a wall squat for as long as they can. And they told them that for every 20 seconds they held the wall squat, they would get a certain amount of money. And in each session, that amount of money varied. It went from about 10 cents per 20 seconds up to about $10 for 20 seconds. And not surprisingly, what happened was the larger the payment that the participants got per each 20 seconds, the longer they were able to hold the wall squat until failure. In both cases, what's happening is you're synthetically increasing the value of the behavior by connecting it to another reward. What these rewards do, and what money does in this case, is it releases dopamine in our brain. And it's released from various parts, but for example, the ventral tegmental area is an area of the brain that releases a significant amount of dopamine, and that is sitting right next to the amygdala. And so when, for example, an addict sees they're trying to make the decision between taking their drug or abstaining and getting the money causes that dopamine to be released and tells the amygdala that the value of abstaining, of achieving that goal, is suddenly increased. And so the value of that behavior is increased, and the amygdala tells the ACC, let's go ahead and achieve that goal. So the next strategy is you need to create positive reinforcers that you receive in order for doing the behaviors that lead to achieving your goal. That reinforcer has to be something that you value highly, like money, and it has to be something that you get immediately after performing the behavior, you get consistently, and it has to be something tangible and objective. For example, it can't just be someone telling you you did great, right? That's very subjective. It has to be something you did X, so you get Y. Just like the researchers were able to determine via blood tests that they abstained and so they received the money. Obviously, this strategy isn't sustainable long term. People don't have endless amounts of money to give. However, it doesn't have to be. This strategy only has to work long enough for your brain to undergo that neuroplasticity and to start rewiring itself towards the goal that is being reinforced. This is also why your goal needs to be specific, because you have to have specific behaviors that can be rewarded and reinforced. Just, I want to look better, that is not going to cut it. It's too subjective, and there's not specific things that you can reward. But we'll get more into that a little later. Now, the next strategy has to do with the fact that as powerful as this positive external reinforcement is, there's something even more powerful, and that's negative external reinforcement. What do I mean by that is that we as human beings, we will work harder in order to prevent losing something than we will to gain an equivalent amount. For example, you would try harder and put more effort into avoiding losing $10 than you would into gaining $10. And it's so significant that you'd put more effort to avoid losing $10 than you would to gain 50. This principle has been shown in numerous studies. One excellent study in particular was done just last year in 2020, where the researchers gathered together participants and had them exert effort in a physical challenge, but they randomly separated them into two groups. And in this challenge, they measured their maximum grip force and then had them repeatedly do different sessions of squeezing. And the people who could hit over 90% of their maximum force for the longest time would win some money. But they did it differently for the two groups. For one group, they started at 0, and then with each session, they could earn 10 points by hitting 90% of their maximum force. With the other group, they started with 0, but they would lose 10 points for every time that they did not hit 90% of their maximum force. And they discovered that the group that had to lose points, say they lost points if they didn't exert the effort, they lasted significantly longer than the group who received points for getting close to their maximum effort. Not only did they grip harder, but they did it for a longer time. And we know that this loss aversion, is what it's called, is also based on dopamine release in our brain, because Parkinson's patients, people who have damaged substantia nigra, where a lot of the dopamine neurons are located, they don't show this loss aversion. So they won't try harder to lose something, or to avoid losing something than to gain it. And I'll talk more about how other areas of the brain are involved in that loss aversion a little later in the video. But for now, the next tip is that you have to create a negative reinforcement situation for yourself. It's going to be a lot easier anyway to find a friend who is willing to take money from you every time you don't do a behavior that's related to your goal than it is you'll find a friend who will pay you. So easier to find and even more effective. But it's important that somebody else has to enforce it. You can't enforce it yourself, say, oh, if I don't do it, then I'll give someone else $10. No, you have to have somebody that will objectively follow up. And if you, for example, skip a day at the gym, that you owe them $10. And you will put significantly more effort into continuing the behavior-related goals to avoid having to give up those $10 than you would if you earned $10 for doing that action. It doesn't have to be money, But again, it does have to be something tangible and objective and consistent. That happens every time you do the behavior in order to start rewiring that brain.
Now, for the next tip, remember that earlier on in the video, when we discussed the reinforcers, whether positive or negative, I said that those aren't sustainable long term, right? But they don't have to be, because they only have to bring in that external motivation long enough for your brain to rewire itself to achieve that internal motivation or intrinsic and have that behavior become automatic. Now, this brings us to something called automotive theory. And there are two different things that happen in your brain when you're making something, a habit, become automatic. The first is, as we've discussed, neuroplasticity. Your brain is making new connections. But there's also a second thing going on. In a study done in 2009, researchers showed that when we are developing a new habit early on, those actions are controlled by the frontal cortex. We're actively making decisions and figuring out how to get something done. But as that behavior is reinforced and done repeatedly, something happens, and it's those actions no longer become controlled by the frontal brain. They are offloaded into areas in the midbrain and other subconscious structures that will perform those actions without your frontal brain even having to think about it. That's why, for example, when you drive to work, oftentimes, if you'll be deep in thought, you'll realize that, I don't even remember driving the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And that's because it's not your conscious mind that's even controlling it. It's being controlled subconsciously. And that's what we want to do with your fitness goal behaviors, make those automatic. But the key is, how long does that take? Well, a study done in 2012 in England showed that it took participants an average of 66 days to form a new complex habit, as in making that something that's done automatically without needing the frontal cortex. Now, the key word there is complex habit. It depends how long it takes to make something automatic, depends on how new it is to you and how different it is from habits and routines that you already have existing. Neuroplasticity really starts happening immediately. So for simple habits or things that aren't too far different from what you're already doing, it can take only a few days to make a new habit. However, for our purposes here, to be safe, I'm going to tell you that you need to keep those external reinforcers going for 2 months. If you can keep those going for 2 months, that will give your brain plenty of time to build the intrinsic motivation and reform or rewire your brain to make the new goal behaviors completely subconscious, something that's just a habit for you. And the next tip takes advantage of a principle that new connections are easier for your brain to make when they are related to existing pathways or existing cues that are already done subconsciously, something that you already do every day. Let's take brushing your teeth, for example. Hopefully that's a daily habit for you. But if you are to cue the new behavior and connect it to brushing your teeth, so say, I'm going to work out every day after I brush my teeth, then your brain will form that new habit much faster and much more easily because it's a connection that's already made. Brushing your teeth, already something I do every day, and I'm just adding working out to that habit pathway. What you don't want to do is to set your cue to be a specific time of day. You don't want to say, I'm going to work out every morning at 7 or every evening at 5, because what happens is inevitably your day will change. Things will come up and you will not be able to work out at the time that you set for yourself. And so you'll just say, too bad, I'll get it next time. And that will slowly devolve into, eventually it's just far enough from being a habit that you give up on the goal. So you want to cue your goals to something that's not time restricted, but something you already do every day.
The next tip is a really cool brain hack, and it has to do with the fact that we as human beings, we discount the value of something the longer we have to wait for it. The longer we have to wait, the less valuable that particular reward appears to us. And this is the reason why so many people fail in their fitness goals, because it takes time in order for your body to change and for you to be able to really see results. So there's two things that we're going to do to handle this effect. The first is that you have to break your goal down into small steps. And in fact, it has to be daily steps, behaviors that lead you to the goal, and then you have to reward those behaviors on a daily basis. So we already discussed what those rewards are, but this discounting of value over time is why you really need rewards on a daily basis that will incentivize those behaviors and will keep you from feeling like, oh, I'm not going to get a reward for way down the road. Now, the second is where the brain hack comes in. And it has to do with a study that was done in 2010 on something called episodic future thinking. The researchers brought a bunch of people in, and after hooking them up to an fMRI, they told them that the participants could accept $20 right away, or $40 if they waited a couple days to receive it, and steadily greater amounts for waiting longer amounts of time to receive it, up to several months down the road. Then, with half of the participants randomly selected before giving a decision, they had them think of events that were going to happen in the future, such as birthdays or anniversaries. These events were spaced out over a period of time, and then they linked the rewards, the money, to those dates. So, for example, if someone had a birthday a month away, then instead of getting $20 now, they could get $60 on the date of their birthday. Or 2 months down the road, when it was their anniversary, if they waited that long, they could get $100. And what happened is that even though they are completely unrelated, people who connected events in the future to waiting to receive the money were willing to wait significantly longer than those who did not connect these events in their mind. And what the fMRI showed was that when the participants were thinking and imagining those events in the future, the ACC was lighting up. And what's happening is the ACC is taking the reward of waiting longer and it's connecting it to that event. Even though they're unrelated, it makes that connection and then tells our frontal cortex that, well, the value of waiting is greater. So what the action item is, what the strategy is when you set your goal, at the same time, plan fun, exciting events, and then connect those in your mind to your goal. And what that will do is it will subconsciously help you be better able to wait to receive the rewards of your goal. Again, even though your birthday is unrelated to working out, by doing that simultaneously and by imagining those events, and it has to be vivid imagining, you really got to picture it and imagine the feelings that you'll have during that event, your brain will link it to your goal and you'll be better able to wait and persist to achieve your goal. For the next tip, there is another thing that our human brains do that decreases the value of something or the perceived value of it, and it's called probability discounting. In other words, the more likely we think something to happen, the greater value we place on that goal or that reward. The less likely we feel it to happen, the less valuable it is. Now, that sounds like just common sense, but there are strategies we can put in place to hack and really tap into that principle. And one is, for fitness goals, study fitness. The more you know about a principle, the better you're going to be able to tell your brain that if I do X, I'm going to get Y. If you're not knowledgeable on the subject and you haven't studied, how the human body works, what are the principles of exercise science, then you're going to be less likely to believe that your effort will lead to the result that you want. So, next action item, study physical fitness. Make sure you increase your knowledge on working out, on everything related to your goal, and the more you know about it, the more confident you will be that doing certain actions will get you to the goal that you want. And the neurobiology behind this is really cool. It's once again dopamine related, but in a study done in 2013, researchers found that the more knowledgeable we became about a subject, the more dopamine receptors became available in our brain connected to actions around that subject. And so when we went to perform those actions, more dopamine is fired, therefore telling our amygdala that that behavior is more valuable. And so the more we know about a subject, the more excited we're going to be to do it, and the better we're going to feel when we are pursuing goals related to that subject. And the next strategy goes hand in hand with that. And it's the fact that researchers have found that there is a link between curiosity and intrinsic motivation. In a study done in 2014, researchers hooked people up to an fMRI and then had them think about things that they were curious about. And they found that areas of the midbrain, including the nucleus accumbens, which we've discussed previously, were lighting up when they were thinking about something they're curious about. And it also activated the hippocampus significantly. And the hippocampus is where our memory is largely stored. And so I actually used this principle in medical school whenever there was a subject that I had a particular hard time learning, or I just really wasn't interested in it. I forced myself to become curious about certain aspects within that subject. And that curiosity helped me remember significantly better and helped me get up the motivation to actually study and learn the material. So by becoming curious about a subject, the hippocampus and nucleus accumbens and other areas of the midbrain connect to the amygdala and say, hey, this is something that's more valuable to us, let's do it more. The tip here is to find some aspect of physical fitness and muscle growth that you either already are curious about or can become curious about. Maybe you have heard about intermittent fasting or blood flow resistance, or you want to understand how hypertrophy works better, or you're curious about what the optimal number of sets and reps are, or what the fast twitch to slow twitch fiber composition is in a particular muscle. Just becoming curious about those things will increase your motivation to do those goal-related behaviors. And at the same time, you will increase your knowledge about the subject, which, as we just discussed, that in and of itself will also increase the value that your brain perceives in those activities.
And with that, we're down to my last two neuroscience-based tips. The first is that when you do set your goals, make sure you write it down. Again, you want it to be something specific, and you want to actually write it down, and ideally include a picture that represents your goal, and then look at that every morning when you wake up, or every morning or every night before you go to bed as part of your meditation. And that's going to do several things with your brain, but one is that the more you look at something, the more your brain tells you it's a part of you. This is called the role of visual fixations. The part of the brain that will analyze anything visual, as I discussed in the very beginning, is the visual cortex, which is here at the very back of the brain. And the more that brain sees something, the more importance it assigns to it. So just the act of looking at that goal will train your brain to have that goal be more of a part of you. And then the reason you want there to be a picture is because the more vivid something is, the easier it will be to get into your amygdala. Right? Your amygdala is emotional, and it's half of your goal directing process, and your goal achievement is emotional. Right? It's that motivation. And so having something vivid to look at will not only train your brain to tell you it's more of a part of you, but it will give that extra piece of motivation in stimulating the amygdala to help you achieve your goal. And my last tip and strategy may be the most important, and it is that when you set your fitness goal or any other goal, make sure that it is very challenging. It is a difficult goal for you to achieve. And that's contrary to a lot of advice that people give. They'll say, oh, just start small, make it something very realistic, easy for you to achieve. And the fact is, the way our brains work, the harder a goal is, the more likely we are to achieve it. This has been shown in numerous studies. There was a landmark study done in 1991 that showed there was a linear effect where the harder a goal was, the more likely it was to be achieved. A study done back in 1978 where researchers had a bunch of households participate in a study where they gave the households a challenge to decrease the amount of energy consumption on a monthly basis that they were using in their houses. But they randomly assigned the households into two different groups, and in one group, they gave them the goal to decrease their consumption by 2%. And in the other group, they gave them the goal to decrease their energy consumption by 20%. Right? Drastic difference. 2%, easy. Right? 20% for anyone would be pretty challenging, right? Well, the results were that almost all of the households that were given the 20% goal achieved it or even surpassed it, whereas almost none of the households that were given the 2% goal achieved it. So why is that the case? Again, this comes back to that amygdala. When a goal is not super challenging, it just doesn't create the emotional impact in ourselves in order to have the amygdala be a significant contributor to our motivation for achieving that goal. The fact is that the easy goals, we just don't want enough. So set your physical fitness goal for what you actually want to achieve. Not what you think is easy, but what you truly want. And that will have the power and the emotional impact to get your amygdala and the other related structures to tell the other parts of your brain, man, we really want this. All right, let's put all the effort we can into achieving.
And with that, you guys now have all the tools that you need to tap into the powers of your brain to go out and smash your fitness goals and every other goal that you set for yourself throughout your life. These principles will only help you if you actually apply them. So don't procrastinate. Tonight or as soon as possible, sit down and make your plan. And as you do, I'd highly recommend reviewing the various strategies that we discussed in these two videos. And you can use the key timestamps that I put in the video description to skip directly to each of the hacks that you want to review. I'm also going to write up a blog post where I will summarize each of these 13 strategies and how they apply to fitness, and then I will give you specific examples from my own life of how I apply them to achieve my goals. Once I'm done with that, I will post it to my website, which is dr-gains.com, and I will also put a link to it in the video description below once it's up. Share this video with your family and friends, particularly anyone who you work out with or who may have the same fitness goals as you. And if you thought this video was valuable, I'd appreciate you hitting that like button and leaving me a comment so that others can find my channel. And if you haven't yet, make sure you're subscribed and turn on those notifications so that you don't miss any of my future content. Now go out and smash those goals, my friends. Until next time.